What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today we have some pretty big news on the next Rocket Takeover happening in Pokemon Go. Obviously, every time the Rocket Takeovers happen, you can TM Frustration off of your Shadow Pokemon, making them a lot more useful than when they have Frustration. But not only that, this rotation actually looks like it's going to be very good just for the new Pokemon that they're adding, as well as some of the interesting Pokemon in the event itself. If you can see here on screen right now, we're going to see that Shadow Palkia is going to be the next legendary in rotation for Giovanni. Shadow Palkia will be eligible in Great League, a very interesting pick, very attack weighted, but also a Pokemon that we haven't had access to, so it might be somewhat cool, as well as Strudel and Grafaiai. These two Pokemon are extremely unique, Grafaiai being a normal and poison type Pokemon, the only one of its kind, although unfortunately in Pokemon Go it is a little bit attack weighted. We'll look at these two later, and then I want to also showcase what the new shadows are real quick. So as you can see here, we have 6 new Shadow Pokemon: Shadow Talo, Shadow Snivy, Shadow Tepig, Shadow Oshawott, and then Shadow Trubbish and Shadow Bunnelby. As you can tell, 2 of these are extremely interesting with the Bunnelby and the Snivy. We already see a ton of Serperior and Diggersby in the open Great League meta, and just having the Shadow treatment on Pokemon that are already pretty bulky is always a very good thing. Samurott and Oshawott always have had like a little bit of play in different kinds of metas. It's never been that good in open Great League, but maybe one day it could be a little bit better, and just having the Shadow treatment is always going to be a very cool thing to have access to. Alright, so heading on over to PvPoke, let's take a look at what some of these new shadows and new Pokemon are going to look like in the game. As you can see here, looking at its stats, it has 141 attack. Combine that with the fact that it's a shadow, it's very squishy. It's not going to be a very bulky Pokemon, and it's likely not going to win too many matchups, but it is going to be interesting in limited metas for sure. I know Shadow Kingdra has had play in the past. If Shadow Kingdra had a cheaper move, it would be a little bit better. Palkia does have that cheaper move, but it is much, much squishier. Taking a look at what it's going to do here in the Open Great League matchups, we can go in the Zero Shield and see there are quite a few losses here. Obviously, you are going to want shields on a Pokemon this squishy. 7 wins, 30 losses, Shadow Palkia not doing too much work here. How about in the 1 shield? Maybe that's going to be a little bit better for us here. Let's see what this is looking like. 8 and 29, I guess we get 1 extra win. Not looking amazing right now. Maybe the 2 shield matchup is where Shadow Palkia can truly shine. Let's take a look at this. What is it looking like? Okay, actually the 2 shield matchup does look pretty fine. 18 and 19, that's pretty average. It's winning about as much as it's losing here, which, saying how bad the 0s and the 1s are, it gives us a little bit of play here. If you wanted to try out Shadow Palkia, it might be able to put in some work. Alright, and the next Pokemon that we want to take a look at is the normal and poison type Pokemon Grafaiai. This Pokemon obviously is another squishy pick, but because it doesn't have the shadow treatment, it's not going to be as squishy as say Palkia would be. With that said, it is going to be locked into 12k eggs, so its stats are likely not going to be the best. And as you can see, the moveset here looking to be basically just mono poison coverage. You have Acid Spray, Poison Fang, Sludge Bomb as charge moves with Poison Jab, or I guess potentially Mud Slap could be kind of interesting in future metas where poison types are allowed. I know that there's a lot of play for Mud Slap Grimer in the past. Maybe Mud Slap Grafaiai could be an interesting play as well. Let's take a look at what this is actually going to look like against the Great League meta in the Zero Shield matchup here. I don't have too high of hopes for mono poison coverage. 11 and 26, yeah, that's not great. It's better than Shadow Palkia, but still, that is not a big benchmark to overcome. In the 1 shield matchup, what are we going to see? It's 14 and 23, so actually fairly average. Obviously, Poison Fang and Poison Jab is a very, very powerful moveset to have a lot of fast move pressure, a lot of debuff potential, and a lot of bait potential as well. In the 2 shield here, actually the exact same as Palkia, 18 and 19, a very neutral Pokemon from the looks of it here, but the worst thing about it is, as I said, no coverage, and it is pretty squishy. The normal typing on Grafaiai makes it so you resist the ghost type damage that you see a lot with the Shadow Claw and Astonish users, but I don't think it really helps out the poison typing too much here, because it does make it so fighting types are now going to do neutral damage into you, so despite being a very unique typing, it's unfortunately not going to be the best Pokemon in Great League. Now let's get into some of the Pokemon that I'm extremely excited about. Here we have Serperior, which is going to be getting the Shadow treatment. Let's compare Serperior with the Shadow variant right now. See what changes, what stays the same. Is this Pokemon going to be an upgrade, a downgrade, a side grade? What exactly is going to happen here? Well, in the Zero Shield matchup, actually the Shadow Serperior ends up picking up 5 matchups, only losing Licky Licky, but gaining Chestnut, which I'm actually a little bit surprised we lose to anyway, because we have access to Aerial Ace. But then you also win against Clodsire with both movesets, Cresselia, and then Malamar in the Zero Shield matchup. The Shadow Serperior actually looking kind of alright here. We have to keep in mind, though, that a lot of these wins and losses are probably very, very close matchups here. Yeah, they're nothing too crazy. That's like a 1 HP win, actually, against the Clodsire with it looks like Sludge Bomb on this moveset. And, of course, it's a little bit of a better win here against the other Clodsire with Stone Edge, but it is still a win nonetheless. A very interesting thing to know that you could probably 2-shot a Clodsire with these Shadow Frenzy plants, whereas the non-Shadow is going to struggle a little bit more to KO that Clodsire. Let's take a look at the next shielding scenario. That was in the zero shield matchup. How about the ones? If we both invest one shield into our Pokemon and into our opponent's Pokemon, actually looks like it's a bit of a downgrade this time. We do end up beating the new Pokemon Dock Spawn, but unfortunately that's all we pick up. We end up losing to Galarian Corsola, to Dunsparce of all things, to Licky Licky, and then also to Primeape, unfortunately. But this matchup, a lot of these things are very close once again, and you can see it's 19 and 17 compared to 22 and 14, so it's still not that bad, but it's not as good as it possibly could be. You know, we've seen Serperior for so long rely on its bulk to differentiate itself from the other Frenzy Plant users. Maybe the Shadow treatment could be kind of interesting, but I don't know if it's a strict upgrade here, as you can see in the ones. But let's take a look at the two-shield matchup. Is it going to be any better? Is it going to give us the intel we need to know if Shadow Serperior is going to be the new replacement? It looks like it's going to be a very, very similar matchup here. We are 18 and 18 with the Shadow and 17 and 19 with the non-Shadow. The only pickups we have here in the two-shield matchup are going to be the Galarian Corsola and the Licky Licky, whereas we drop Malamar. Malamar is a very common Pokemon in the Go Battle League, so losing out on that does kind of suck, but Corsola as well is picking up in usage. It's a Pokemon that is hard to take care of with neutral damage. Shadow Serperior, though, apparently being one of the few Pokemon that can just brute force its way through it. So it seems like this Serperior here is still a little bit of a side grade. There's not really an obvious choice if you want to use the Shadow or the non-Shadow. I'm still kind of leaning towards the non-Shadow because the bulk that Serperior has is very unique for a Grass-type Pokemon, especially one with Frenzy Plant and decent coverage with Aerial Ace. So I'm not expecting the Shadow Serperior to be all that common, but it is still going to be a very viable option and a Pokemon you're going to have to prepare for. All right, next up, let's take a look at the other Pokemon that I am extremely excited for here. We have Diggersby. Diggersby is a very bulky Pokemon, a Pokemon that can definitely take advantage of the Shadow treatment right now. Let's see what it's going to look like here. Obviously, Fire Punch recently got buffed this season, so a Shadow buffed Fire Punch could potentially be a very interesting play to see against the Grass types, maybe even the Ice types in the meta. The Zero Shield matchup, very neutral stuff here. It looks like we end up picking up Shadow Feraligatr, actually, with the Shadow Diggersby, and Shadow Alolan Sandslash, whereas we lose to Ariados, Chestnut, Marowak, and Shadow Quagsire. I'm kind of surprised that you would have ever beaten Chestnut or Shadow Quagsire in the first place, but losing to those, I guess it makes sense. Ariados as well could just start adding up over time with the Trailblazes, whereas the regular Diggersby is a little bit bulkier. It's able to take those moves a little bit better. But the Shadow Feraligatr win, that's huge. You see Gator basically every single set in the Go Battle League. Shadow Alolan Sandslash is not as common as the regular Alolan Sandslash right now, but still, it's going to do a lot of damage with those Fire Punches. This Pokemon could be very interesting, depending on how it looks like in the more extended shielding scenarios. So let's take a look at that. The zeros are not too interesting here. It looks like it probably is not worth the trade-off to lose out on the bulk in that specific scenario. How about the one shield, though? We're going to see that this time it's actually going to be a net gain. We are able to win two more matchups here with the Shadow Diggersby that the non-Shadow is not able to win. We have Barrel, a Pokemon that is a very interesting Pokemon to pick up here. Obviously a Water-type Pokemon, same with Shadow Feraligatr. We end up beating both of those because of our extra damage. We also can beat Marowak, Alolan Shadow. That's not exactly the useful Marowak to beat, but oh, look at that. We also beat the Shadow Marowak on its own as well, which is fantastic to see. And then also Wigglytuff, which is a very annoying Pokemon just in general in the Go Battle League. So very happy to always have ways to neutrally deal with Pokemon like that. We end up dropping Gastrodon, which is still going to be a very neutral matchup from the looks of it. Yeah, just a very, very slim loss here. We're going to see Greninja, which I'm surprised you win in the first place with Diggersby, but we end up having a hard loss because the Hydro Cannons plus the Water Shurikens will be able to knock you out in one hit, whereas it doesn't quite with the bulk on the regular Diggersby. And then what is the final loss? It's going to be the Shadow Alolan Sandslash, actually. So the zeros end up going in favor of Diggersby. The ones go in favor of the Alolan Sandslash. So that's kind of interesting to know. But overall, I think, once again, this isn't exactly conclusive here, which one you'd want to use. Diggersby having a lot of bulk is always helpful, but Shadow Diggersby might just have a little bit more damage in these neutral scenarios that could help it win matchups it wouldn't otherwise be able to. All right, next in the two-shield matchup here, what are we going to see Diggersby perform like? Is it going to give us the answer that we want? Okay, well, a lot of changes actually in the two-shield here. We only end up picking one win overall over the regular Diggersby, but the thing is, the wins that we have are very interesting. Ariados, Barrel, Shadow Quagsire, Gastrodon, Jumpluff, of all things. We end up beating Jumpluff in the two-shield matchup here. Mandibuzz, and Marowak Alolan Shadow, which is not exactly the most important pickup, but Mandibuzz, Jumpluff, Shadow Quagsire, Ariados, Barrel, these are huge pickups for the Shadow Diggersby. This could definitely be a good case that you'd want to run the Shadow over the non-Shadow here. What do we end up losing, though? What are we going to miss out on not having that bulk? We end up losing to Darkspawn. Diggersby, Shadow Drapion. That's a pretty bad thing to start losing to. Obviously, Aqua Tails are going to add up over time. Likely, it's going to be in range where after the Poison Sting damage in the 2-shield, Shadow Drapion into Shadow Diggersby, 2 Aqua Tails will be enough to knock you out, which is why this matchup ends up flipping in favor of Drapion. That is a little unfortunate to see. That's a big Pokemon that Diggersby is supposed to answer, but because of that getting outpaced here, I guess, with ground type moves, and also just the offensive pressure of Shadow Drapion, we end up dropping that with our Shadow Diggersby. Malabar also ends up becoming a loss, which is crazy that you even win in the first place here as Diggersby. But I feel like this is not exactly just like the full story. Maybe if you shield superpowers properly, maybe if you end up baiting fire punches, it can flip one way or another. But it is always going to be a matchup that I think Diggersby is going to have a lot of play into. Shadow Marowak also just barely becoming a loss here in the 2-shield matchup. You ended up just kind of outbulking it with the old Diggersby, the bulky one, the Shadow one, not quite enough bulk here to win the 2-shield matchup, but it would still put it pretty low from the looks of it. And then our favorite Pokemon, Wigglytuff, once again in the 2-shield matchup, looks like we do end up losing this because Wigglytuff is one of the best fast move Pokemon in the game. It can just charm you all the way down, I guess, especially after going for these Icy Wind debuffs. They can make it so our damage isn't going to do all that much to them. They can just 2-shield, fast move all the way down against our Diggersby, which is a little bit unfortunate, but it is still, it's a Wigglytuff, right? What else would you expect from a Pokemon like that? So yeah, very interesting new Pokemon here, right? Grafaiai, an interesting, unique typing. Normal and Poison is not a typing that has ever existed before Generation 9, Grafaiai being the only Pokemon in the game with that typing. Then also Shadow Palkia, another one of those kind of niche picks that probably won't be all that good, but it is a pick that you want to be on the lookout for just in case you have a good one, and it might be good in limited metas in the future. Shadow Kingdra, as I've said before, has had play in the past, so I don't see why Shadow Palkia couldn't at the very least have a little bit of niche play. Then we also have the 2 heavy hitters, the Shadow Serperior and the Shadow Diggersby, both of which have a lot of benefits to them, but a few drawbacks as well that makes it so it's not really obvious which one you would want to use. In my opinion, you probably just still want to use the non-Shadow Diggersby and the non-Shadow Serperior, but I can't see why the other two wouldn't work out just as well in many different scenarios. It's going to come down to what your team comp is, if you want that bit of extra damage, or if you need that extra bulk, and that is always what it comes down to here. Now we have the option to choose, do we want to use a squishier Diggersby, do we want to use a squishier Serperior, have a bit more offense, and trade our defense for that? It is now up to us to determine that, and I always love when they give us these options. Another thing I really am hoping for from this Rocket event is Shadow Scorpy and Shadow Cubone. These are 2 of the best Shadow Pokemon in the game. They haven't really released the new Rocket lineups just yet. It's going to be a bit till we actually can confirm whether or not the new event's going to have these. But I want to see that Cubone back. I don't have a Shadow Kanto Marowak. I would love one to have myself. But because I don't have one, I am just kind of stuck using other Mud Slappers, other ground types. I don't have the option to use it. I would want to see Cubone back. First and foremost, that Pokemon has not been around for a very long time. So I'm hoping that Niantic is going to bring it back. Shadow Scorpy as well. I think that Shadow Drapion is probably my favorite Pokemon in the Open Great League just in general right now with how flexible it is. Aqua Tail, Crunch, Poison Sting. It is just great coverage, a lot of fast move and charge move pressure, the ability to debuff things, Aqua Tail taking out the ground types that are basically Drapion's only weakness. It is an insane Pokemon, and it has been kind of in grunts recently, but normally it's a very rare encounter, and I think in this current rotation it's not even accessible, so I hope that they do bring it back, and I hope that they make it a lot easier to get, because Shadow Drapion, once again, is basically the best Pokemon right now in Open Great League. Alright, well, thank you so much for watching. If you want to see more analysis videos like this in the future, or just more gameplay videos of Pokemon Go PvP, I upload a ton to the channel. I would love to see you in future videos. Make sure to subscribe. Thank you again for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.